The 2010s were a decade of change for the hot hatch. The concept had grown and developed over the previous few decades. But as the 2000s wore on, the hot hatch market began to splinter into different directions. Some became lumpy, larger, and slower. But the very best retained that essence that makes a hot hatch a hot hatch. Here are the 10 we love the most. Surely the final Fiesta ST of the decade was the very best. A small hot hatch so good that we even preferred it to the mighty Focus RS. The 7th generation ST had been on many people's favourite car lists and had spawned a mighty limited edition called the ST200. So good was the 7 that people wondered where the 8 would go. It turned out Ford's answer was a smaller engine. Puzzling, I know, but somehow it worked. The 1.5 litre 3-cylinder engine in the ST is an absolute gem, and it feels like the great things they prototyped in the ST200 were then immediately installed on the Mark 8. Couple that engine with possibly the best steering you'll find on a modern car, incredible sports seats, and a great interior, and, well, it's hard to imagine how they will better it. All that for less than £20,000 as well. It might be the best value performance car around. The smallest car in this video is also the angriest. The Up GTI is no hooligan. It doesn't want to murder your family and hide the evidence. It's more furious that the rest of the world is bigger than it is, and it needs to show you why. Cliché alert, this is possibly the real successor to the original Golf GTI. It has around the same horsepower at 110, is about the same size, and you can tell where the rest of this comparison is going. The Up GTI is the hot hatch returning to its smaller roots, focusing on fun and a little nuts, without having to extract 300 horsepower. And even if you rag the absolute nuts off it, you'll only be doing 122 miles per hour. And you'd need the best part of a year to get there. Like the ST, it has a lovely thrummy little 3-cylinder engine, and is just eager as anything in the mid-range. Plus, it only costs £15,000 and has proper GTI tartan seats. This is the most controversial one on this list. Almost the antithesis to the Up GTI, the Golf R has been absolutely loaded with tech. It was all-wheel drive, it had 300 horsepower, it was a full-size hatch, and it came with a dual-clutch gearbox. And you can rail all you like about the hot hatch not being about all these silly things, and then you drive it, and, well, it just makes sense. The Golf R is the mile muncher, the one that you point at the countryside with the aim of being there very, very fast. It's the kind of car that when you need to smash your way across Wales at 4 a.m. when the sun won't be up for several hours, then you can, and you'll arrive there without breaking sweat. The Golf R will split both critics and drivers. It's not an ultimate driver's car like some on this list, but it is the new kind of hot hatch that arrived in the 2010s. The comfortable one. The difficult second album. The second Swift Sport is just not the same as the first one. The first one was a completely left field arrival, an unexpected hoot. It was the perfect car to enjoy without ever worrying about that police car you just saw. The second one, well, it doesn't quite live up to the original. It's more powerful, but it's heavier. It's got more tech, but it's heavier. It's more leery on the outside, but it's heavier. You can see where we're going. The thing is, despite being more comfortable and less chuckable than the old one, the second Swift Sport is still fun, and is still cheaper than a slower Vauxhall Corsa. In reality, if the second Swift Sport had come first, we'd all have still loved it and championed it. You can still have the same wheel-cocking fun, and the 1.4 litre four-cylinder is still an angry little bee. But it just wasn't the first one. The big daddy, the big cheese, the king of the hot hatches, the last one. Yes, the Ford Focus RS died at the end of the last decade, but boy, did it go out with a bang. The RS had been the head of the queue through the development of the bigger hot hatch. The kind that has 300 horsepower and is bigger, much bigger than a Mk1 Golf GTI. The latest one had 350 horsepower. A massive wing, massive arches, a fake diffuser, a four-cylinder engine that desperately wished it had 5, all-wheel drive, and even drift mode. Yes, the interior was naff and about 5 years old before the RS was launched, and the way it handled at times made you feel like the Focus RS just wanted to spit you off a straight road. But get this Focus up to higher speeds and nothing would catch it. With a glorious 6-speed manual gearbox, steering that was fidgety at lower speeds and magnificent above 50, and a tail that could be kicked out in the right settings, the RS was a mind-blowing experience. Perhaps not as pure as the Fiesta ST, but bonkers fun. If this is the send-off for the RS series, then what a way to go. If we could sneak it in, we'd take the Cupra ST, but that's an estate, and, So, here is the standard. Underneath, the Leon Cupra is a Golf, but it happens to have a much more curvaceous body. The Cupra is, no offence to the Golf, just a much more interesting car to look at. And with 290 horsepower and the ability to hit 62 miles an hour in 5.6 seconds, you wonder why you needed a Volkswagen badge at all. Inside, the Leon felt like a Volkswagen, with a lovely touchscreen and all the materials you'd expect from an Audi. The driving feel was never quite there to match some here, but makes the list for out-golfing the Golf without being a Golf. Surely, we can't include a fat Volkswagen Polo in this list. It's just a small VW with a silly engine and a daft all-wheel drive system, right? Well, a bit of that is right, but in many other ways, it's completely wrong. Audi had developed a reputation for fast but anemic cars, so fitting the tiny A1 with the same engine from the Golf and, for some reason, a four-wheel drive system didn't really inspire anyone. But then, actually, it was engaging to drive, and with that engine, it was an absolute rocket ship. We're not exactly sure why we needed a tiny hot hatch with four-wheel drive and 230 horsepower, but we're very glad we got it. It even managed not to try and crush your skull into your spine in the way the TT had spent nearly 20 years trying to perfect. The only problem with the S1 was that if you spec'd the car properly, it was 30 grand. At which point, you might as well have bought a Golf R. There was a more recent Civic Type R, and it is definitely faster and more capable than the FK2, but we still love the older car. Based on the 9th generation Civic, the penultimate one to be built in Swindon, the FK2 Type R was revealed as the 2014 Type R concept at Geneva in 2014. The first turbocharged Type R Honda had ever made, it booted power by 50% and torque by 100% with its VTEC engine. 310 horsepower and a frankly silly 400 newton meters of torque were transmitted to the road by just the front wheels. In the wet, you'd have been better off accelerating on a bicycle, but with an aggressive limited slip diff, it was nimble, grippy, and a complete hoot in the dry. The best Civic Type R ever? We think so. It is not harsh to say that fast Renaults just aren't what they used to be. The Clio RS went off the rails after the 200 and has never found its way back. The Megane got a bit flabby in its third generation and took a series of special editions to fix it. The fourth generation was much of the same. The standard car in 280 form was, well, it was fine. It's fun to drive, and the rear-wheel steer made it feel like it was on trolley wheels at times, but it just didn't have that fizz. The 300 Trophy, on the other hand, refound the hooligan element. You had to have it in lurid yellow to go with the aggression. Other colours were available, but only to a real heathen. And the Megane had become the shouty, wild monster we wanted it to be. With as near as damn it 300 horsepower and a Torsen diff and 6-speed manual, the 300 Trophy has all the things you want in a modern big hot hatch. It turned out that RenaultSport did still know how to make a car, for which we should all be very, very happy. If you had told us 10 years ago that the car with the best front end around would be a Hyundai, I'd probably have called you an ambulance. But it's true. The turn-in bite on the Hyundai i30N is astonishing. When Hyundai went rallying with the little i20, we all thought it was some strange PR stunt, and why would it ever have anything to do with real road cars? But then the i30 arrived and wiped that smug smile off our faces, because it was brilliant. It looks great, even in white, has an exhaust that will pop on the upshift, adaptive dampers that go from waft to destroy your back, a meaty, turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, and a front end to die for, all for around £25,000. Sure, the i30N was a little brash around the edges, but its arrival in the hot hatch market was the equivalent of breaking down the bar door, punching the local hardman, and then just calmly sipping a pint while eyeballing the locals.